Question number 1, Mr. Chris Butler.
Number 1, sir.
This morning I presided at a meeting of the Cabinet and had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today. This evening I hope to have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen.
Mr. Butler.
Would my right honourable friend agree that it is vital that our troops know that they have the overwhelming support of this House, and not only to liberate Kuwait, but also to realise the promise of a newly effective United Nations?
Mr. Speaker, I very much agree with my honourable friend, and I believe his views will be echoed throughout the House. I very much hope that very strong support will be sustained both within and beyond this House in the difficult weeks ahead.
Mr. Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity of supporting the feeling expressed by the Prime Minister earlier today that the current conflict was not wanted by those allied against Iraq and is therefore regretted. May I also say to him that for the sake of our forces and their families, and for the sake of innocent civilians in Kuwait and Iraq, people everywhere will hope that success in fulfilling the purposes of the United Nations is achieved as speedily as possible. Will, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister take this opportunity to make it clear that Saddam Hussein can quickly prevent further death and destruction by fully and immediately complying with the resolutions of the United Nations, by laying down all Iraqi arms, and by respecting international law?
I agree with the right honourable gentleman, and I'm grateful for the way in which he expressed it. I very much hope at an early stage that Saddam Hussein will do what he should have done a long time ago, make it clear that he was prepared to leave Kuwait fully, wholly, unconditionally, and spare the world the conflict that is at present going on.
Mr. Treaty.
My right honourable friend will be aware of the Joint Chief of Staff of the United States, General Colin Powell's assessment that 80% of sorties have been effected against Iraq. Is this not a remarkable achievement and a great credit to the Allied forces? And does not the pinpoint bombing which we have seen on the news illustrate that there will not be the civilian casualties in Iraq which some had feared? And that is important because our quarrel is not with the people of Iraq.
I agree with my honourable friend. Our problem is not with the people of Iraq, but with the dictator of Iraq who has created the invasion of Kuwait. That is entirely right. I would echo what my honourable friend has said about the precision bombing that we have seen thus far. I think I might also add that much of that precision bombing is carried out at low level precisely to avoid civilian casualties, sometimes at some risk to our pilots. I think their bravery deserves acknowledgement.
Mr. Speaker, we all heard the news of last night's action with deep regret that this war had to be fought. Does the Prime Minister realise that there is in this House, and I believe in the nation, no mood of jingoism for war, but a deep determination to see through a job that has to be done, to support our forces and to back the United Nations?
I agree with the right honourable gentleman. We entered into this enterprise with reluctance, but we will pursue it with persistence until the end.
Mr. Malcolm Thornton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend accept my warm congratulations for the way in which he made his statement this morning, particularly for the way in which he answered the questions which were put to him by the press? Would he agree with the commentator on Radio 4 this morning, who was urging that we should not attempt, through many of the armchair generals who will be commentating on this debate, to second-guess what the military are doing in Iraq?
I think it is already clear from what we have seen today that the degree of care in the planning that has actually been carried out by the Allied High Command has been very successful. I think the conduct of these military operations is in very satisfactory military hands.
Sir David Cleland.
Two, sir.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Cleland.
Does the Prime Minister recall that many of our hostages who have now returned from Iraq spoke of the friendliness and helpfulness of ordinary Iraqi citizens during the period of their entrapment? And would he confirm that this war is against Saddam Hussein and his henchmen and not against ordinary families in Iraq? And would he further agree with me that ordinary Iraqi nationals living in this country, many of whom are themselves refugees from the oppression of Saddam Hussein, ought not to be harassed and held accountable for the actions of the dictator?
Upon that last point, I am grateful to the honourable gentleman for making it. It is entirely true. There are a large number of Iraqi citizens in the United Kingdom who are precisely here because they have been persecuted by Saddam Hussein, and I think their refuge here will be appreciated and understood by the British people. Insofar as his earlier point is concerned, I entirely agree with him. We have no quarrel whatsoever with ordinary Iraqi people. It is, as I said a moment ago, the dictatorship of Iraq that we are opposing.
Sir Eldon Griffiths.
Since President Bush this morning said that one of his war aims was to destroy the existing chemical and potential atomic war-making capacity of Iraq, will my right honourable friend associate the United Kingdom with that war aim? And will he also say that once those installations are destroyed, that no British and no European company will in the future assist in their being replaced?
Those, as my honourable friend may know, those installations have been attacked, but thus far we're not entirely sure with what success. I hope that will become apparent later. I would certainly hope subsequently that firms will have very great care in any dealings they may have with those who may recreate that sort of facility.
Mr. Tamdiel.
Number 3, sir.
I met the chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff on the 4th of December. British commanders, of course, have been in regular touch with General Powell.
Mr. Diel.
General Powell be instructed either to accept or offer a call for a ceasefire. Would we have to wait until Kuwait was occupied by coalition forces? And in the light of my letter of yesterday to him, could the Prime Minister clarify the differences between himself on the one hand and Secretary Cheney and General Powell on the other on the use and legal aspects of nuclear weapons?
Insofar as the first point of the honourable gentleman's question is concerned, the conflict can cease when it becomes clear beyond doubt that the Iraqis are moving out of Kuwait, and we are certain that that is the case. That has and will continue to be the position. Insofar as the use of nuclear weapons are concerned, I think I made it clear in the debate that we had the other day that we did not envisage the use of nuclear weapons. To the best of our knowledge, Iraq does not have a nuclear capacity. Under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which has been signed by both the United States and ourselves, we would not therefore use them.
Mr. Jonathan Aitken.
Would my right honourable friend agree that one of the vital ingredients in the success of the military operations so far was General Powell's request, courageously supported on November the 9th by President Bush and by the British Cabinet, to double up the numbers of troops and aircraft deployed to their present high levels? Would my right honourable friend like to take this opportunity to congratulate all those responsible on both sides of the Atlantic, from commanders to backroom boys, on this remarkable feat of military logistics and preparedness?
I would certainly be most happy to do that. Indeed, I'm bound to say that on the occasion when I was able to visit Dhahran and look at some of the military establishments a week or so ago, it really was quite astonishing to see the way the sheer logistics of reaching such a dramatic armada of weaponry, both in terms of land forces and air forces, had been carried out. It has been a very remarkable logistical operation.
Dr. David Owen.
The Prime Minister agree that one of the significant achievements of General Powell has been to ensure that this is not just an American dispute with the Iraqi government, but that he has involved the Arab governments. And will we all not pay tribute to the Saudi Arabians and the Kuwaiti government in exile for agreeing to have their aircraft flying into Iraq in marked distinction to the French?
I certainly believe it is entirely welcome that there has been a multinational effort in terms of the attacks upon Iraq today. My understanding is that it was a four-nation attack in the first wave, But as the right honourable gentleman may not yet have heard, France has joined in the attack at a later stage. And I understand some of her aircraft have suffered damage.
Jonathan Said! Mr. Said, number 4.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Said!
Though difficult to consider any matter other than the Middle East today, will my right honourable friend bend his mind to the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty, which just 2 months ago seemed to offer so much hope for peace in the world? As all 22 signatories are required to ratify that treaty, does my right honourable friend believe that will happen after the brutal repression in Latvia and Lithuania and the undermining of the spirit of the treaty by certain elements in the Soviet military?
I very much hope that treaty will be signed. Clearly there are a number of serious problems that need to be resolved, and particularly the transfer, for example, of the Soviet Union of a large number of their tanks from the army to the navy with the intention of bypassing the treaty. It does have, I must tell my honourable friend, the absurd position of ensuring that the Soviet navy have more tanks than the British army.
Mr. David Winnick.
5, sir.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Winnick.
Is it not the case, Mr. Speaker, that Saddam Hussein must be held responsible not only for the present war and tragedy, but for the loss of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi soldiers who lost their lives during a totally useless war, a futile war against Iran? Who is this criminal dictator to lecture us about the loss of innocent lives?
I am delighted. I am delighted to share the sentiments the honourable gentleman expresses.
Peter Emery.
Mr. Speaker, will my right honourable friend accept the praise of his colleagues on this side of the House for the way that he has handled the situation so far? But will he accept also that there is considerable congratulations to be given to the Leader of the Opposition and to the Leader of the SDP, who have unified behind the government in one way?
I agree with my honourable friend that these names and these initials are very difficult. I have been very pleased and very heartened, but more importantly, I think our troops will have been pleased and heartened to see the uniformity of support given to them from this House.
Number 6, sir.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Speaker, following the decision of the Soviet Union earlier today to reject the CSCE call for an international conference on the situation in the Baltic, and following the first death in Latvia yesterday and the appearance of militiamen with their black berets, and following President Gorbachev's attempt to extinguish a free press in the Soviet Union, doesn't the Prime Minister agree that it's now time, if we're to be even-handed in our treatment of human rights abuses and the right of self-determination, to convene a meeting of the Security Council to discuss the situation in the Baltic states? So doesn't he agree with Boris Yeltsin, who said that we're at the beginning of a mighty offensive against democracy?
As I made clear to the House in question time earlier this week, I deeply deplore the actions that we've seen in Vilnius, and I very much regret the reports that a Latvian civilian has now been killed by Soviet security guards. We have made our views crystal clear to the Soviet Union. They can be in absolutely no doubt about the way in which we view that, and we have also made it clear that the continued help of the European community will depend upon the Soviet Union pursuing a path of reform and not of repression.
Mr. James Couchman.
Number 7, sir.
I refer my honourable friend to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Couchman.
The thoughts and prayers of many of my constituents will be with the sappers serving with our troops in the Gulf, sappers from the Medway towns. Will my right honourable friend seek to reassure them in their anxiety that the courage and superb professionalism of all our troops will contribute to a swift and satisfactory outcome to this conflict, which many of us had hoped would never happen?
I have no doubt that it will contribute to a successful outcome. I must say to my honourable friend that we should be under no illusions whatsoever about the scale and potential might of the Iraqi forces. Whilst I am confident about the success, I cannot yet be confident about the speed of that success, and I think we should prepare ourselves for that fact.